Just when you thought the paleoanthropological world couldn't get any weirder, a stunning new claim surfaced briefly, only to seemingly vanish. Ludovic Slimak, a French paleoanthropologist, in an interview with Pais magazine, mentioned finding a body in a deep cave from a layer that predates glaciation, resembling a 7-year-old child but was actually an adult. The implications are staggering. Yet beyond that tantalizing statement, no formal publication exists detailing this supposed find. Nevertheless, we can't help but piece together what's known, or hinted at, to probe the mystery of whether Europe once housed its own small-bodied hominin deep in time. In the interview, Slimak says, "We found a body in a deep cave, in a layer of soil that predates glaciation. It looks like a 7-year-old child, but it's the body of an adult. There are no Neandertal features. It could be a population like the Hobbit of Flores, isolated in a very dense forest, as they were at that time. There may be several more bodies. It will take years of work." However, soon after this article was published, these statements were removed. This is a mind-boggling statement by one of the leading Neanderthal experts in the world. Slimak became well known in recent years for his discovery of modern human teeth, dating to 54,000 years ago at Grotta Mandrin, and the discovery of a Neanderthal jaw and teeth, which he named Thorin. The lack of concrete details leaves only one avenue wide open: speculation. With no formal publication or images, we are left to decipher what Slimak means by the body of a 7-year-old and the claim of no Neanderthal morphology. Could this imply a previously unknown, small-bodied, gracile, Homo sapiens-like population? Without data, we can only hypothesize about what no Neanderthal morphology suggests. It might be a distinct evolutionary branch or simply a surprising variation. In the absence of clarity, the unknown invites us to imagine what might have been discovered. Until solid evidence emerges, we remain suspended between fact and speculation. Digging into Slimak's recent work, a paper he co-authored in 2023 suggests a possible location for this discovery: a little-known cave called Orgnac 3, also in the Rhône region of southeastern France, where the famous Grotta Mandrin cave is located. In the paper, Slimak discusses several human teeth found in the cave back in the 1960s. These teeth are unusual because they look very modern, and yet recent dating has placed them at 375,000 to 400,000 years old. This falls within a long interglacial, which could be the time period that predates glaciation that Slimak spoke of. The bombshell announcement, and then its abrupt disappearance, has left the paleoanthropology world buzzing with questions. In the paper, he suggests that further excavations should be done. This aligns with a discovery that would have been made likely in the summer of 2025. Slimak's quote described a layer that predates glaciation, suggesting a timeline at least 400,000 years ago during the Middle Pleistocene. Orgnac Cave contains stratigraphy dated to around 400,000 years, even older than previously believed. Some layers remain unexcavated, adding to the mystery. To say a layer predates glaciation strongly implies it sits in an interglacial or pre-glacial era. Orgnac 3 Cave in Rhône Valley, where Slimak has conducted extensive work, has been dated in some layers to around 400,000 years ago, right in that Middle Pleistocene zone. Orgnac Cave's stratigraphy is key here. The site has deep layers. The lower levels have been dated to around 400,000 years or slightly older. These layers fall into a warm phase, a time when forests could have flourished. The deeper the strata, the older the material, potentially even nearing 500,000 years. Could a small-bodied population have existed in mainland Europe 400,000 years ago? It's a radical suggestion. At that time, Europe was occupied by hominins evolving into Neanderthals or related populations, all assumed to be of typical archaic human stature. No evidence suggests dwarfism or insular isolation on the continent, but then again most of what we know is based on larger skeletal remains. To understand the weight of the phrase "the body of a 7-year-old", we have to move beyond height and into developmental biology. A 7-year-old human is not simply a shorter adult. A child's skeleton is organized differently. The proportions, the growth trajectories, and the architecture of the bones follow a specific developmental sequence that gradually shifts into the adult form during adolescence. So when someone invokes 7-year-old proportions, they are describing a very specific anatomical pattern. In 2003, excavations at Liangbois revealed one of the most startling hominin skeletons ever found. The specimen belonged to what was later named Homo floresiensis. At first glance, the skeleton appeared almost childlike. The individual stood only about 106 to 110 centimeters tall, roughly 3.5 feet. Yet detailed anatomical analysis demonstrated that it was not a child but an adult female. The skeleton combined a mosaic of traits. The skull was small, with a cranial capacity of approximately 426 cubic centimeters, far below that of modern humans and even smaller than many earlier hominins. The brow ridges were modest rather than massively projecting. The face was relatively short. The mandible lacked a pronounced chin, as expected in archaic humans. The postcranial skeleton was equally striking. The limbs were short relative to the torso. The shoulders were somewhat forward-oriented. The wrists retained primitive configurations more reminiscent of early Homo species than of modern humans. The feet were long in proportion to leg length, giving the overall body plan a distinct silhouette. Crucially, however, it also exhibited adult characteristics. The long bones showed fused epiphyses, indicating skeletal maturity. The dentition consisted of fully erupted permanent teeth. Pelvic morphology and bone microstructure confirmed adulthood. The small size was therefore not a matter of juvenile status, but a genuine adult body plan. This is why the discovery forced researchers to consider either extreme pathological dwarfism in a modern human, or more dramatically, the survival of a distinct small-bodied hominin lineage on Flores. After years of debate, the consensus favored the latter. Now imagine for a moment a comparable skeleton emerging from a Middle Pleistocene European cave, dated to roughly 400,000 years ago. A fully mature adult standing near 4 feet tall. Short legs relative to torso, slender limb shafts, narrow shoulders. No clear Neanderthal traits in the skull. Such a discovery would not simply add a footnote to European prehistory. It would fundamentally alter it. Around 400,000 years ago, Europe was occupied by populations generally regarded as ancestral to Neanderthals. Fossils from sites such as Cima de los Huesos and Arago Cave show individuals trending toward the robust Neanderthal body plan, thick cortical bone, broad chests, powerful limb proportions. Even juveniles from these sites display skeletal trajectories toward large-bodied adults. There is no known European counterpart to Flores, no established dwarf lineage in continental contexts. If a non-Neanderthal European hobbit existed, the evolutionary implications would be enormous. It could suggest a relict population isolated in forested refugia. It could represent a lineage branching earlier from the Homo tree than the Neanderthal line. Alternatively, it might reflect an unexpected morphological diversity within Middle Pleistocene Europe. The Flores skeleton demonstrated that dramatic body size reduction is biologically possible within the genus Homo. But Flores was an island with long-term ecological isolation. Continental Europe was not. That contrast is what would make a 4-foot-tall adult from a European cave so extraordinary. The Hobbit of Flores rewrote the evolutionary map of Southeast Asia. A comparable European specimen would do the same for the Middle Pleistocene of the West. If an individual were described as an adult, but retaining the proportions of a 7-year-old, that would not be a trivial observation. It would imply that the organism reached biological maturity, meaning full dental eruption and skeletal fusion, without completing the expected proportional transformation of adolescence. Another possibility is that this could represent sexual dimorphism, but females are underreported in the fossil record. To see how dramatic that would be in context, consider the Middle Pleistocene populations of Europe around 400,000 years ago. Fossils from sites such as Cima de los Huesos and Arago show bodies trending toward the Neanderthal form, thick cortical bone, wide chests, powerful limb proportions. These were not gracile forest primates. They were robust, large-bodied hominins adapted to fluctuating climates. Their growth trajectories, while not identical to modern humans, did not produce diminutive adult bodies with childlike frames. So, if an adult at roughly 400,000 years old truly possessed the proportions of a 7-year-old child, that would suggest a radically different developmental program. One possibility would be extreme neoteny within a known lineage. Another would be that we are dealing with a distinct population that evolved along a separate path. That is why the phrase 7-year-old proportions carries such evolutionary weight. It is not simply a description of small stature. It is a claim about growth timing, about developmental arrest or delay, about the architecture of the skeleton itself. In paleoanthropology, such a claim would require extraordinary evidence. Growth plate fusion, dental eruption patterns, cortical bone thickness, and pelvic morphology would all need to confirm adulthood. Without those markers, the most parsimonious explanation for childlike proportions is that the individual was in fact a child. But if those markers did confirm adulthood, then the implications expand dramatically. It would suggest a highly isolated population with altered growth patterns, or a lineage with a fundamentally different ontogenetic trajectory. In evolutionary biology, changes in development can produce large morphological shifts rapidly. A shift in growth timing can reshape a species. That is why invoking adult retention of 7-year-old proportions is not a minor anatomical curiosity. It is a hypothesis that touches on developmental biology, ecology, and evolutionary divergence simultaneously. We know that teeth discovered at Orgnac 3 are intriguing. Previous excavations unearthed juvenile teeth, one specimen suggested to be around 400,000 years old, described as pre-Neanderthal. But here's the twist. Slimak's comments imply something beyond Neanderthal precursors. He states no Neanderthal features were present. If accurate, that suggests an entirely different morphology, one not fitting into the known Neanderthal lineage. Earlier finds included teeth attributed to a pre-Neanderthal juvenile, yet the teeth were never fully classified, and Slimak's comment hinted at more than teeth, perhaps the elusive body. Slimak, in his upcoming book The People of the Forest, suggests an archaic population living in dense forest, an enigmatic group without Neanderthal traits. This silence, no publication, no details, leaves us staring into the deep layers of Orgnac cave, wondering what truly might be waiting beneath. In the 2023 paper, the authors revisited prior excavations, noting that Orgnac cave's deposits likely span older periods than previously thought, possibly reaching back to 500,000 years. Past excavations revealed 7 hominin teeth, including deciduous molars and incisors from juveniles, attributed to a pre-Neanderthal stage. This makes Orgnac 3 not merely a transitional site, but one potentially spanning a much broader evolutionary timeframe with implications for understanding Neanderthal origins. The details noted from the teeth, like their size and shape, have often been described as more aligned with what we'd expect in the lineage leading toward modern humans or Neanderthals. Certainly not as primitive as what we'd see in Homo erectus or Homo naledi. That's what makes any suggestion of a small-bodied adult so intriguing. It might hint at unexpected complexity in Middle Pleistocene populations. Crucially, these teeth do not have any Neanderthal features. They were classified as being from children, aged likely between 5 and 9 years, but not robust. They are gracile. This echoes Slimak's remarks on the body of a 7-year-old that is actually an adult, which likely means a skeleton and possibly a skull and additional teeth. Teeth don't lie. The idea of early Homo sapiens in Europe 400,000 years ago may seem surprising, but in the eastern Mediterranean there are Homo sapiens teeth dated between 200 and 400,000 years at Kesem Cave. In China, modern human teeth have been dated to 230,000 years, and in Morocco, just across the Strait of Gibraltar, early Homo sapiens lived from at least 800,000 years ago. The descriptive text associated with the Orgnac cave material adds further nuance. The tooth in question was described as having a crown more elongated than those of modern human and Neanderthal juveniles. These details suggest that the morphology did not comfortably fit into classic late Neanderthal patterns. Instead, it was labelled pre-Neanderthal, a term historically used for Middle Pleistocene European hominins that predate fully developed Neanderthal anatomy. And that is why, if such a hominin truly exists at roughly 400,000 years old in Europe, it would represent a claim far larger than simple variation. It would suggest that the Middle Pleistocene human landscape was more structurally diverse than the current model allows. We can only wait to learn the true facts of this discovery in the years to come. Thanks for watching.